heavily invested in all these things. They've, spent almost half a century trying to take over the Supreme Court to a point where I think people rewrite the education system, things like that. And a lot of what we're seeing now harms, connect back to them and a few other billionaires who have funded all these things. And of course, they were some of the original climate denialists funding millions and millions into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I wanted to talk a little bit more about like what's wrong with that idea, like if you build more housing, then the prices will go down. And this is based on research that I did last year, which was I looked at like 30 most recent articles, academic articles, doing research and studies on these questions about deregulation and prices and things like that. And so it's a whole long report. If you want to see the whole report, there's my first QR code number, folks. I'm so proud of myself. Hopefully it works. Right? Okay. So here's the basic argument. If you deregulate land use and zoning, it will increase the supply and it will lower costs, including rent. Now, there's a bunch of problems with this, which is that it assumes that land use and zoning are constraints to supply, right? But in reality, in a housing market, there really is no scarcity of land, right? For generations, cities have expanded land. Now, that doesn't mean that's a good thing, right? Because we know sprawl is bad. But the idea that there's nowhere else to build is a fallacy, right? There's always other places to build in San Marcos or Round Rock or wherever it might be. It might not be desirable, okay, but it doesn't constrain the supply, right? The zoning rules don't constrain supply. They might constrain where people can live, but that's a different question. And so it's a lot more complicated than they tend to admit. They say if you increase housing supply, well, one of the problems with that argument is that they'd say how many housing units there are in the whole housing market, right, in the greater Austin area, but that doesn't take into account that there's lots of different what are called submarkets, right? Of course, we all know that if you don't make a lot of money, you have very few choices, right? And this theory does not acknowledge that. It doesn't see that there are, some people are shopping for this kind of house. They have a big family. Some people are single people, right? Some people have higher incomes, all that kind of stuff. This ignores all of that, right? So just the absolute number of units is going to bring down all prices, which is, right, doesn't work that way. Certain units, affordable to a certain number of people, and things like that. The other thing is that the main thing that they argue is that it's the high cost of land that is causing this because of this supposed constraint on land. And what this does is this ignores what is a long established idea of location premium. So geographers, I'm an urban geographer. This is this picture up here is a diagram that you see in almost every introductory geography textbook and urban geography textbook. And what it talks about is how land that is closer to a very desirable location, like the center of a city, it's going to cost more, right? Because there's certain locations that people are going to pay extra to live near, right? And if you don't have equal incomes across people, then rich people are going to move to the areas that are more expensive, right? And that are more desirable, right? Because they can afford it, right? Everyone would love to live in the most luxurious, beautiful place, but we all can't afford it, right? Their theory ignores that whole picture, right? The other thing that urban geographers have known for a long time is that as a city grows, not only does it spread out, but the cone goes up. And what that means is that as cities become bigger, there's more pressure on that central point, that location that people want to be at, and therefore the prices there are going to go higher, right? So a city doesn't just spread out this way, but in theory, the prices also increase upward. So if you think about New York, the biggest city in the country, but also the one that's most expensive at the center, right? Or the Bay Area in San Francisco, right? It's huge. There's like 9 million people that live in the Bay Area, super expensive in the center of San Francisco, right? So, so their theories ignore all that. What is this? Oh yeah, I'm just gonna skip it. It's just a quote from Ed Glazer from that paper from 2003, where he totally focuses on land and doesn't acknowledge the fact that location is super important. Okay, so what were some of the takeaways from when I said I did all this research